Okay, I think it's starting to get set up. Um, so we're on to go till about 4 o'clock. And let's see, I think it's almost ready. Let me just check here. Okay, I just want to verify this is actually working. Give me a second. Oh, Bella, can you check to see? Is it working? I think it is. Oh, and so we just hit Bella?
I don't see it for some reason, but let me keep checking.
See on video. Okay. Let me just check to see if I can see it. And also, Bella, could you email out to everyone on the invite the Zoom call information so that people have it too? Okay, I see it's live, so I think we're okay there, Bella. So maybe just refresh your screen, and you should be able to see it and see the comments. And then if people email you, you can email them the Zoom information, and then let them in. And if they misbehave, you can kill them on the Zoom. So hopefully we don't have too many Zoom bombers. First of all, thank you everyone for joining my office hours this Sunday. I'm pleased to have here Councilmember Lee from the city of San Mateo joining us. So what I'd like to do, so what we're talking about today is affordable housing here in the Bay Area. Definitely one of the challenges that we have. And so I'd like Councilmember Lee to just quickly introduce yourself, maybe say a few words on this topic, and then for the people on the call, we'll go around and everyone could introduce themselves as well, and kind of say a few words on their perspective for this. And then we'll have a conversation with Councilmember Lee about the challenges and potential solutions for affordable housing here in the Bay Area. So Councilmember Lee, why don't you go ahead and please introduce yourself.
Thank you for having me, and I'm really excited to be here. I have served on the council since 2019, and San Mateo is about your neighboring city. We have around 105,000 people, very diverse income levels, and are very much struggling with the issue of affordability, and particularly our aging population, and needing to have a complete workforce that's not doing super commutes. So this is an issue very near and dear to my heart, and I have a personal story about affordable housing. I at one point lived in affordable housing, and it was for me one of the most important stabilizing forces in my life to get me back on track. And so I really do see affordable housing as a poverty strategy, an anti-poverty strategy, and I want to be part of the solutions here in San Mateo, my chosen home.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. So I just want to go around to give all the attendees here a chance to quickly introduce themselves, say their perspective, and then we'll begin the dialogue. So I think I saw, I'll just read the people off on the screen. So Rangu, followed by Steve.
I'm a long-term resident of Palo Alto, been here around since 1981. I'm interested in this, the topic of affordable housing, because I do attend city council meetings in Palo Alto and listen to a lot of the dialogue that goes on. And so this is a topic that's of interest because this has to be addressed by a lot of the towns around the area. And I'm interested, obviously, from the viewpoint of how it's going to impact life in Palo Alto. And one question, sort of a general concern question I have, is affordable housing. It's not really defined very clearly, at least in my mind, what is meant by affordable housing. What kind of income are we trying to address? Like, is it a minimum 100K, minimum 150K, minimum 200K? So I don't really know what affordable housing is, even though it sounds good. And I think housing is important in general. So I'm interested in hearing what Councilman Tanaka and Amourence have to say, because you have a slightly different view because you're responsible for a much larger group of people. And so I would like to hear what you think on the topic. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Thank you, Rangu. So we're definitely going to keep this interactive. So, but let's go on to Steve, followed by Linnea.
Sure, thanks, Greg. I've lived and worked in Palo Alto for 50 years. I work on housing professionally as a regional economist. I guess the one thing that I would throw out as a worry is that residents in Palo Alto, and I suspect in San Mateo, don't appreciate that even nonprofit housing projects have to pencil out, and they end up adding all sorts of cost and time delays that make good projects infeasible for developers, and we've had examples of that here. So I'm interested in what you all think can be done to get people to understand that these projects have to pencil out, and you can't add parking and environmental cost and drag out 2 years of meetings, or you won't have the housing that we need.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, Linnea, followed by Kevin. Oh, I think you muted, Linnea.
My name is Linnea Wickstrom. I've been a casual advocate for housing along with my son who's disabled. We've been before the city council of 2 cities and planning commissions and so forth for extremely low income and low income housing, particularly for people with disabilities. I'm also very interested in increased density in exclusionary cities like Palo Alto. Particularly in the era of Black Lives Matter and so forth, it's just Black and Hispanic people have been historically discriminated against, and R1 is one of the hugest discriminatory factors there are, historically as well as now. So Greg, I'd be interested in your support for, I know you're on the city, but the cities often protest state bills that are attempting to overturn some of these exclusionary practices, which keep our cities, and I'm not going to say it's white because it's not white anymore. There's exclusionary practices that basically apply to Black and Hispanic people. So I'm interested in your support for future, through the city, for future state measures to try to get rid of some of those exclusionary policies, as I say, especially R1.
Great, thank you for sharing your thoughts. I'm making a list of stuff that we'll talk about, so I added to the list. Thank you. Okay, Kevin, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, I'm Kevin Ma. I'm a relatively recent renter in the Ventura neighborhood, so not too far from the NV cap actually. So as a renter, I'm extremely focused on the housing crisis we see in this entire area that basically prevents people of my kind of style, which is like early 20s or even 30s, to like actually find a long-term residence within the Bay Area. So yeah, so it's interesting to see how Palo Alto will keep up with laws like SB 35 or something along those lines.
Okay, great. Thank you everyone for joining. So let's begin the discussion. So I'll start a little bit with my background. So I've been serving on the city council since 2017, we didn't necessarily live in affordable housing, but I grew up in a very poor household. My dad never finished high school, so I'm actually with Councilmember Lee in terms of understanding having stable housing is really important to raising a family. So definitely can associate with that, and so let's kind of get into the discussion here. So I think that's a really good. Let's start off with the first thing was what is affordable housing, right? Because I think affordable housing means different things to different people. So I guess, Councilmember Lee, what's your thoughts on what's a good definition of affordable housing? Because this is something which I think when we talk about the need for affordable housing, it's not really clear as to what what is affordable housing, right?
Well, I think that it's not clear to the public, but I think it's actually a highly regulated term in the form of the projects that actually take place. And so, for example, we have very clear benchmarks for what constitutes extremely low and moderate income households, and it's pegged to area median income, and that's adjusted on an annual basis through the state. And so, for example, I think it helps to kind of bring it down to the consumer level to speak in those terms. Like, for example, the city of San Mateo is accepting applications for a new project that will open in Bay Meadows, and it's called Montara, and applications are due this coming the 30th, at the end of the month, the 31st, 31 days this month. And so, for example, in this project, a 1-bedroom that is pegged to 60% area media income, the estimated monthly rent is $1,911. And so if you look at what market rate is for a 1-bedroom apartment, people are paying, sometimes $3,000 for a 1-bedroom apartment. It's easily $1,000 less. For a 3-bedroom apartment at 60% AMI or area media income, the monthly estimated rent is $2,631. So when we talk about affordable housing at the local level, that are designated affordable units through inclusionary projects and through our city plan projects, we are talking about a highly regulated system that where every single applicant who goes through the process and is deemed eligible, they are vetted on an annual basis. And so we make sure that the people who qualify remain qualified and can stay, in the project according to their means and needs. So it's not a pie in the sky like this is affordable. It's something that there's a lot of accountability and metrics.
Yeah, you're actually right. From the technical point of view, you're absolutely right. I think for policymakers like you, myself, we kind of know that affordable housing is actually very, very well defined. But I think for the average person, back to Rangu's point, it's a little bit like I think for people on council, I think it's pretty clear what affordable housing is because we have all the things you just mentioned. But I think for the average person, they probably don't know all the things that you just talked about, right? And so I think each person has kind of their own definition of what that is, and so I think that's why Rangu asked that question. I think it's a good one, but I think to your point, I think we actually have this fairly well defined, but I just don't think it's well known.
Definitely. And it just means that we need to do a much better job as a city government to make it known, to make what we mean by in those definitions clearer, so that people can get behind the affordable housing projects and the, and the potential of them, and with real, clarity and understanding.
Sorry, Steve, you were going to say something?
2 points, Greg. One, just elaborating on what the councilwoman said. If you have one of these deed restricted projects like Wilton Court in Palo Alto, the tenants pay no more than 30% of their income, in addition to everything the councilwoman said. So the rent is fixed in relation to the income, not the cost of the project or anything else. But most people that I know, when they talk about affordable housing, don't talk about the technical definition that you two both are correct on, because there are lots of people that want housing that's affordable to them in the market. That's not what we're talking about now, but it is really important to talk about housing affordability, because that's important to people who are desperately challenged by high rents, but will never qualify for the rent subsidized BMR housing. And so you have both these definitions going on. Wouldn't want to lose the broader one or the technical one.
I appreciate that, and I would just add to that one of the things that I think a lot about is affordability for the our renter population, but also for those who want to own and want to build equity, and so there are a lot of folks in our workforce who would love to have a kind of product on the market, a housing product that would that's within their affordable range, that's completely outside of the technical affordability range. And so that's really where, when we were talking about the missing middle and our workforce housing needs and the opportunity to create housing products for sale for first-time buyers
For teachers, perhaps, right? Yeah.
and our teachers.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good point. So let's move on to the second part here. And by the way, people are welcome to chime in or ask additional questions, but we're just going to go through the topics that we just all talked about. So let's talk. So we talked about what the definition is of affordable housing, and there's a technical and there's one that people feel themselves, which is, can I afford it, right? Which is one that most people use is, can I afford, how much of this housing takes up of my paycheck, which is how most people look at affordable housing. But let's move on to the second topic here, which is the need for affordable housing. So both Councilmember Lee and myself talked about we didn't necessarily grow up, like I certainly didn't grow up in an area like Palo Alto. I mean, we were definitely living month to month, um, and um, and so Councilmember Lee, I don't know if you could speak a little bit about not necessarily in your personal terms or my personal terms, but just broadly, like what is creating the need for affordable housing here in the Bay Area?
I think most people, most of the best minds attribute it to a accelerated job growth and not having the commensurate infrastructure or housing growth alongside it. And so I think that's pretty much in a nutshell the story that's driven our housing crisis, is that we have many more people who are coming to work here that belong to this community, or it's identified with this community, but not sufficient housing. And I, for one, would never be able to be part of San Mateo. And I would never be able to live here if it weren't for the moment in time that that we moved here when I was pregnant 11 years ago. And so just in the 11 years since I've rooted here in San Mateo, I would be priced out.
Yeah, well, me too, here in Palo Alto. So.
Let me add two things.
Sure.
What the Councilwoman said, and she's correct. One is there's a dramatic funding shortage. These nonprofit developers need either people that have tax credits, they need money like the city of Palo Alto put in for Wilton Court. I suspect San Mateo City has put in some money. So there's a funding shortage, but you also need to convince residents to cite the projects, not to add cost, not to delay it. The residents, or hopefully the law at some point, will make it so viable projects aren't hamstrung.
Right.
That's in addition to the shortage and the jobs and the techies bidding up stuff. We still need the money to get the projects built, and we need the process in cities. I don't know how it goes in San Mateo. Maybe you guys are a lot better than we are in Palo Alto in welcoming these projects.
Well, yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think of it in a couple of buckets. There's the financing part of it. There's the streamlining the policy and process in our own codes that our city council has a lot of control over and leverage. And then there's the community buy-in, and so all those three things have to really come together for projects to happen. And that's where I'm chipping away at all of those things. And so you're right. I mean, I've been following the financing piece of this, and I think advocates who support affordable housing, they're and are rightly demanding it and calling for us to do more. Are not necessarily seeing the constraints, and for the first time ever in the history of our affordable housing financing in California, our affordable housing bonds, our tax credit bonds, are now becoming more competitive. and they're drying up. And so we're going to need to see some action at the state level to make sure that we're not in competition with each other to even finance. Because if we can't finance it, it's a non-starter. Period. It won't get built. And there's no intentions in the world that can make up for the millions of dollars. And there's just no way to build projects without the tax credits.
Yeah. So I'm also with, oh, sorry, Linnea, why don't you go ahead?
I was just going to interject that it's very much a case too that we all ought to be supporting the streamlining processes, many of which in the state legislature, the cities have opposed. And it always comes down to A, parking, and B, something called neighborhood character, which is blatantly exclusionary. And I think cities should be supporting, and city council members, the first thing I'm looking for in city council members for the next election is support for all housing, not just affordable housing, and particularly support for state measures which would prevent the kind of paralysis that occurs in cities like Palo Alto, where we go through years of residents, older white residents, turning up and screaming, no, 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 we don't want higher density. For instance, I've got 2 lots on either side of me that could be permitted easily by the city of Palo Alto for 5,000 square foot, 2-story new houses. There's absolutely no reason, and I would not object in any way, to having a duplex or a triplex on both of those old, small houses when they go down. And so using my own property as an example, it makes no difference to me if it's a duplex, triplex, or even a quadplex, because a 5,000 square foot, 2-story house on the same lot would have no additional impact on me, other than parking, which I'm not afraid of, or neighbors, which I'm not afraid of.
Thank you for sharing that.
Streamlining the ability of residents to fight this stuff is, to me, critical.
So we have about 5 minutes left. So I hopefully, if some of you guys are willing to go a little bit over time here, I don't know if Councilmember Lee, you have time, but I wanted to get into the third question, which is the one that Steve brought up, which is what makes this hard, right? So a lot of people have been talking about affordable housing and the need for affordable housing. And I think a lot of people acknowledge it, but it's been really hard. Like, so for here in Palo Alto, you know, we have one on the corner of Page Mill and El Camino that's being built right now. There's Wilton Court, which is, you know, the city's put a bunch of money. You know, we basically use the rest of our housing reserve for that, and it still has to yet to break ground. There's the ones where on the El Camino where the Mike's Bike project is. You know, it's unclear whether that can even happen. So, Councilmember Lee, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about what are the things that make, kind of like what Steve said earlier, make it difficult for affordable housing to pencil out, for actually, because you could zone for it, right? You could even try to promote it, but actually building and actually seeing it come to reality is another story, right? And so can you maybe just kind of give it, at least from the San Mateo perspective,
Sure.
you know, what are some of the things that make it difficult, and like why is it such a difficult problem to actually do, even though a lot of people have been talking about this for a while? And maybe you could share some of your thoughts on this.
I think, you know, it comes down to a couple of things. The cost of land is so incredibly high, and that makes it really challenging to pencil. And as Linnea or Ms. Wickstrom, is that how you're pronouncing it? Wickstrom? Ms. Wickstrom was saying, I do believe that that the caps on height and density are also major contributors to the problem of making projects pencil. And you hear that all the time, doesn't pencil. But the truth is that if it doesn't pencil, it won't get built. And so if you can, I take your point really to heart. If you can build a 4,000 square foot single family home for one family, you could technically fit 4 1,000 square foot apartments in that same home, in the same footprint. actually. And I think that the challenges that we have, for example, with height and density are, I do believe, are really holding us back, especially in areas that that makes sense to go up and go more dense around transit hubs and around in our downtown. And I would really strongly support higher density, higher height in those areas that I think we need to, for, you know, just from a climate perspective and reducing our carbon footprint. From, you know, from a humanitarian perspective, you know, we need the housing and we need our workforce to have a life of dignity and good health and time with their family. Those are all things that every person deserves. That they're part of the fabric of our community, and so it's the right thing to do from the long-term perspective, and it makes sense. And it's actually, there's very clear need and demand for it. And so you know, those are the ways that I think that, you know, I see us as a go forward. And there is a ballot measure on our in San Mateo that will be coming up in 2020, and we're looking to defeat Measure P, which is the height and density cap that has capped all of our buildings at essentially 55 feet. And so those are the things, and 50 acres per 50 units per acre. And so the only way that we've been able to go around 50 units per acre, for example, with one of our projects called the Mid-Penn Project downtown, that we were able to utilize the state density bonus because it's a 100% affordable project. So we were able to get go from 164 units and homes to 225 units on one parcel. That is density. That is how density can work for us. It's a clear example. 225 homes for families. That would not be possible under Measure P. You would only get 50.
And to add to that, Greg, you lived through Wilton Court. So Palo Alto had a parcel that was zoned for 11 units. We changed the zoning, and because they could build 60 units, 59 units, it could barely pencil out, but it did. Density translates into low enough cost that the project is feasible. Anything we can do to lower cost, whether it's streamlining the process so they don't have to take so much time and money, whether it's having parking that makes sense for lower income families, or in Linnea's case, children who are disabled. She and I both share that. But if you don't get the cost down, and density and height is a big way to do that, you're just fighting a losing battle.
But the issue with density is we always get the common opposition. Like, since I live in Ventura, I'm across from the planned development at the Barron Park neighborhood at Hanson, the one at the Stanford Research Park. And there's already debates, like it's like a 5 or 6 story building, and there's already still questions like, it's still too tall, we need to reduce it to 4 or whatever. So even though the alternative is just all commercial.
Yeah, it's good comments. So we're officially at 4 o'clock. There's a lot more questions we could dive into, but I want to respect people's time here. I guess I just want to thank Councilmember Lee for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with us. For me, I always found it valuable to talk with my colleagues in other cities to see how they do it and how they solve problems, because you know, I think that's kind of a neat thing, is that there's all these cities around us, and everyone has slightly different policies, and you can learn a lot from others in terms of what they've been able to do to get things working. But I wanted to just give Councilmember Lee a chance to just say a few words, and you know, any other final thoughts you might have.
Well, I've been talking a lot, Greg. I'm curious, but tell me about your height and density.
I think the things you talked about are definitely issues in terms of limitations here in our city, in terms of but I think the one thing you didn't talk about, which I think Steve talked about earlier, which I think we should, you know, just spend a few minutes on, which is there's a project on El Camino. It's the old Mike's bike. You don't know what that is, but it's where it used to be a bicycle shop, and this project was approved. Maybe 2 years ago? I don't know. It's been a while. It's been approved. Has yet to break ground. It's right now. It's just vacant. vacant building. And so I think so there's definitely regulatory type of challenges, right? But it's to the point that Steve talked about earlier, which is it has to pencil out, right? So so this one actually received no subsidies from the city per se, right? But it was a long process. I think I don't know if anyone here can remember how long it took, but it took a while for it to get through. So there's a lot of uncertainty to actually getting it approved. And then by the time it finally got approved, the construction cost, also like skyrocketed, right? And so it became, in terms of penciling out, it couldn't pencil out. I mean, I think right now I'm not even sure it will be built because even though they have all the entitlements now, it can't really be built because of just the cost. It's to the point that Steve was talking about from the economics point of view, because it's so expensive. And so that's, I think, one of the challenges sometimes when you have, I know some places have talked about like having a really, really high percentage of BMR, but if you do that, sometimes you can't fund the project, right? Not unless there's some sort of city funding in there, right? So I think that's one of the challenges. Or if you have really high, really high impact fees, it makes it also hard, right? Where it's to the point that Steve talked about. So these are small. I think you talked about some of the bigger things, but there's all these little small things that also make it challenging. Whether it's like a incredibly uncertain entitlement process or uncertain or long, or there's a bunch of uh, uh, like impact fees, or there's like I mean, this is just one of the things which the construction costs
Yeah.
has just
One of the things that we did recently for the Mid-Penn project is we updated our requirements for impact fees to be waived for 100% affordable projects. And so there's our parks fee, which would have amounted to millions and millions of dollars on top of the cost of the community benefit that's being provided for a 100% affordable project. And I think that those are the things that cleaning up those kinds of codes and making sure that that we're not putting up roadblocks for these affordable projects to be built, because we don't need we can do without the parks impact fee. We can figure that part out. But if those units don't get built, then our community is going to suffer. Those are some of the code cleanup efforts that we're undertaking.
Yeah.
One of the things that you two council people can do is work on the legislature. I've suggested this a couple of times, that the legislature create a bond to have money to backfill the fees. So you can waive the fees and keep the project costs down, but the state will reimburse you so that the city doesn't lose the money. Because sometimes those fees are important for the city revenue base. And that would be a win-win if the state would backfill them because they're committed to building more units for low-income folks.
I mean, it doesn't have to be state, right? Like Santa Clara County does have like Measure A bonds we did in 2016, though I have not seen any Palo Alto projects actually try to use it so far. So.
Okay, guys, we're 6 minutes overtime here. Just wanted to thank everyone for taking time out of the Sunday. This is a very important topic, and it's a hard one to solve. So just want to appreciate Councilman Lee for taking time out of your schedule to come and chat with us. And thank you. Councilman Lee has also been collaborating with me on just the budget challenges that both of our cities have faced. So thank you so much for your help on that as well.
Thank you.
And yeah, I want to keep this dialogue going. So you guys are welcome to keep commenting on this, and we could keep trying to have a discussion on this topic. But thank you guys for taking time out of your Sunday to have a discussion with us. And thank you for sharing your advice and thoughts about
thanks for having a forum on the topic.
Great. Yes, thank you.
Of course. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Okay,
have a great weekend. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, Greg.
Bye.